بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بار محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Let us begin tonight's program with the recitation of the Holy Quran. I'd like to request Brothers on Air Wasim to please come forward and recite the Quran for us with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj.
Inshallah, I'll be reciting some of the first few verses from Surah Yunus. If you'd like to follow along, it's until verse number 10. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ألف لام را تلك آيات الكتاب الحكيم. أكان للناس عجبا أن أوحينا إلى رجل منهم أن أنذر الناس وبشر الذين آمنوا أن لهم قدم صدق عند ربهم. قال الكافرون إن هذا لساحر مبين. إن ربكم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش يدبر الأمر ما من شفيع إلا من بعد إذنه. ذلكم الله ربكم فاعبدوه أفلا تذكرون. إليه مرجعكم جميعا وعد الله حقا. إنه يبدأ الخلق ثم يعيده ليجزي الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات بالقسط والذين كفروا لهم شراب من حميم وعذاب أليم بما كانوا يكفرون. هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا وقدره منازل لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب. ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. إن في اختلاف الليل والنهار وما خلق الله في السماوات والأرض لآيات لقوم يتقون. إن الذين لا يرجون لقاءنا وردوا بالحياة الدنيا وطمأنوا بها والذين هم عن آياتنا غافلون. أولئك مأواهم النار بما كانوا يكسبون إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات يهديهم ربهم بإيمانهم تجري من تحتهم الأنهار في جنات النعيم دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين صدق الله العلي العظيم. And so inshallah I'll recite the translation as well. The translation begins Alif Lam Ra. And in this translation it also has some parentheses which kind of explain some further things, so I'm going to add that. It begins Alif Lam Ra. These letters are one of the miracles of the Quran, and none but Allah knows their meanings. These are the verses of the book, the Quran Al-Hakim, showing lawful and unlawful things, explaining Allah's divine laws for mankind, leading them to external happiness by ordering them to follow the true Islamic monotheism, worshipping none but Allah alone, that will guide them to paradise and save them from the hellfire. It is a wonder for mankind that we have sent our inspiration to a man from among themselves, warn mankind and give them good news, give good news to those who believe that they shall with their Lord, that they shall have with their Lord the reward of their good deeds. But the disbelievers say, this is indeed an evident sorcerer. Surely your Lord is Allah, who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and then rose over the throne, disposing the affairs of all things. No intercessor can plead with him except after his leave. That is Allah your Lord, so worship him alone, then will you not remember. To him is the return of all you. The promise of Allah is true. It is he who begins the creation and then will repeat it, that he may reward with justice those who believe and do good deeds of righteousness. But those who disbelieve will have a drink of boiling fluids and painful torment because they used to disbelieve. It is he who made the sun a shining light and the moon as a light, and measure out their stages, so that you might know the number of years and reckoning. Allah did not create this, but in truth he explains the ayat in detail for people who have knowledge. Verily, in the alternation of the night and day, and in all that Allah has created in the heavens and the earth, are proofs for those who keep their duty to Allah and fear Him much. Verily, those who hope not for their meeting with us, but are pleased and satisfied with the life of the pleasant world, and those who are heedless of our ayat, their abode will be the fire because of what they used to do. Verily, those who believe in the oneness of Allah, Islamic monotheism, and do good deeds of righteousness, their Lord will guide them through their faith. Under them will flow rivers in the gardens of delight. Their way of request therein will be, glory be to Allah and salam. And the close of their request will be, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Sadaqallahu al-Aliyyul Azim.
Jazakallah for that beautiful recitation. One more loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajhum. Just a couple of quick announcements before I request the Shaykh to come to the minbar. Tonight marks the end of our Ramadan programs. Tonight is our last program for the month of Ramadan. We do not have a program tomorrow night. Inshallah, on Tuesday, April 9th, starting 7 p.m., we have the Chandrat festival here, the night before Eid festival, that has been organized by City of Knowledge and Wisdom Academy combined. Please register if you wish to attend that event, so that we can better make arrangements to accommodate you. Inshallah, subject to moon sighting, most likely Wednesday, April 10th will be Eid al-Fitr. And here at CFK, we will have 3 Eid Salats. The first Eid Salat will be at 7:30 a.m., led by Shaykh Muhammad al-Saadi. The second Eid Salat at 9:30 a.m., led by Shaykh Amin Rastani. And the third Eid Salat at 10:45 a.m., inshallah, led by Shaykh Mahdi Rastani. Once again, please register. It will help us manage limited parking and capacity. Links to register for both events will be present on the WhatsApp announcements and the email newsletter that goes out. We also look forward to welcoming you for the Eid picnic that is organized by City of Knowledge on Sunday, April 14th at 1:30 p.m., inshallah. I would now like to request everyone to please recite a Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of tonight's program sponsors, and let us also please include our own marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Let us please welcome the Shaykh to the minbar with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فانطلقا حتى إذا ركبا في السفينة خرقها قال أخرقتها لتغرق أهلها لقد جئت شيئا إمرا قال إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال لا تؤاخذني بما نسيت ولا ترهقني من أمري عسرا. فانطلقا حتى إذا لقيا غلاما فقتله قال أقتلت نفسا زكية بغير نفس لقد جئت شيئا نكرا قال ألم أقل لك إنك لن تستطيع معي صبرا قال إن سألتك عن شيء بعدها فلا تصاحبني قد بلغت من لدني عذرا. فانطلقا فانطلقا حتى إذا أتيا أهل قرية استطعما أهلها فوجدا فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأبوا أن يضيفوهما فوجدا فيها جدارا يريد أن ينقض فأقامه قال لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا قال هذا فراق بيني وبينك سأنبئك بتأويل ما لم تستطع عليه صبرا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات اللهم صل على محمد. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Yesterday we discussed this portion of the story of Musa and Khidr, where Musa approached this teacher of his with the utmost manner and finally had the permission and the ijazah to join him and to shadow him and to learn from his knowledge. And we spoke about the importance and the significance of knowledge and why a scholar who's dedicated his whole life, 50, 60, 70 years of his life, is given the type of respect that Islam tells us to give to him. So all of the hard work and sweat and effort that has gone into building that level of knowledge. This is why Musa, when he came to Khidr, he came to him with a lot of humility. Hal attabi'uka, do I have permission to follow you so that I can learn from some of those things that you have knowledge of? Their journey began, and as part of their journey, of course, Khidr had told him that if you come with me, this is going to be very difficult for you to be patient, because I know that I have a type of knowledge that you do not have. And because of that, you're not going to be able to understand the events that are going to unfold. Musa maybe even had overestimated a little bit his own knowledge and his own ability. He said, it's fine, I will come with you. وَلَا أَعْصِي لَكَ أَمْرًا, I will not disobey you in anything that you are doing. He ended up doing this, at least objecting to what Khidr did. And Khidr was very patient with Musa. He told him that I understand the level of knowledge you have. Because of that, you won't be able to understand the things that I do. But nonetheless, when Musa broke his promise and objected, still Khidr showed him a very beautiful type of patience. This was the first event that took place out of the three events. The first of those events was when they came upon this ship or this boat that they rowed, both of them together, or all three of them together. And then Khidr poked a hole in that ship or in that boat. Musa saw this, objected to him, and this was the first of those three actions. The second of those actions that we will discuss today, inshallah, is that Khidr, believe it or not, this special servant of God is going to take the life of a young man. What's the wisdom behind that? And why is God deciding to do this? Khidr will unfold or unveil that for us later in the story. And number three of the events is that they will come into a city that is extremely unfriendly, and for some odd reason, Khidr still decides to contribute to the well-being of that city. A door or a wall that they find that is about to fall, you find Khidr comes and straightens this wall and reinforces this wall. To which Musa objects again. They were very unfriendly when it came to us. Why is it that you're contributing to the well-being of this society and this community? And this is where Khidr said, this is the end of our meeting and the end of our session together. You have to go your own way and I have to go my own way. This is where we'll continue our discussion, inshallah, by posing the following questions. Number one, was Musa to blame for the objections that he continued to raise to the terrible things, at least from his angle, that Khidr was doing? Was it right for him to do this? Was it wrong for him to do this? And what lesson can you and I learn from the objections that Musa is raising towards Khidr? There's a very important lesson in this for our whole community. Number two, when Musa and Khidr entered into that village that was extremely unfriendly towards them, why did Khidr continue to decide to fix the wall, And what lesson lies in there? In doing the right thing, even if there are people who don't appreciate the right thing that you have decided to do. Number 3, can the actions of a father or a mother or a grandfather or a grandmother, many, many generations before, impact the lineage of a person? Can a grandfather do something wrong and because of that his lineage ends up paying a price? And if that is the case, how is that compatible with God's mercy and God's justice? Number 4, why does Khidr, in what he does sometimes, attribute his actions to himself at times, and at other times to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at other times between himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What's the wisdom behind this as he goes through these 3 separate actions? And number 5, and finally, what was the parting advice, the final words of advice that Khidr shared with Musa after Musa knew for a fact that he would not be able to join him anymore? Tonight, inshallah, we'll delve into these 5 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. All right, it's clear we're getting to the end of Ramadan. The salawat is very weak. A loud salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. The first of those actions that Khidr did was, of course, the ship. Musa raised objection to him. Khidr turned around to him and said, I told you, you wouldn't be able to be patient with the things that I'm doing because I am operating in a completely different world compared to your world. In your world, you have to say no to the things I'm doing. So what you're doing makes sense. But I'm operating in a different world. I'm operating from a different mode altogether. But Musa struggled to understand this. So this was the first of those events. The verses of the Quran say, then they carried on with their journey, and Khidr saw this young man. This young man, he's living his life, doesn't seem to be doing anything negative or evil. And the Quran says, فَقَتَلَهُ. The Quran says he took his life. Of course, when Musa saw this, he couldn't control it anymore. He said, what are you doing? This is absolute evil. How dare you take the life of a person? أَقَتَلْتَ نَفْسًا بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ. You're taking the life of a person who has not taken the life of another person. So if this is a person who's taken the life of another person, in our faith, in our religion, depending on where you live and so on and so forth, sometimes you have the right to do qisas. Yes? That's a separate discussion. But he's never done anything like this. He's not evil. He's never done anything like this. You're taking his life. So of course Khidr came back to him. قَالَ أَلَمْ أَقُلْ لَكَ. I told you, you wouldn't be able to take this. This is difficult. He doesn't share the wisdom with him at this point. Still, there's a third step. He wants to go with Musa alayhi salam. But out of the 3 actions that Khidr is doing, the first is somewhat problematic because they're poking the hole in the ship. That's going to lead to something. The second is probably the most problematic of all of them. Why is it the most problematic of all of them? Because this is murder. So obviously he raises objection. Now, it's interesting that what Musa is doing, in fact, is admirable. It's a good thing. You and I are supposed to be more like Musa than Khidr. Khidr is just here to show that there's wisdom behind events that happen in this world. We're not privy to those wisdoms. So I can't sit here and say, oh, I'm going to take your niyaz tonight. Why are you going to take my food? I'm going to take your iftar because there's some wisdom God has in mind. So I'm going to take, no, you're not Khidr. You and me are Musa. You and me are supposed to act like Musa. So what Musa did was very admirable. Why is it admirable? This is a big issue in our communities. Very admirable. Why? Because Musa never sat there and said, oh, this is my guy. It's okay, he does these wrong things, but he's approved. He's not a problem. I know him. We know each other. We have a relationship. He didn't do that. What did Musa do? Musa saw something wrong happening, and he said, wait a second, I'm not okay with this. Now, how does this play out in our communities? How does this play out in our families? In our families, if he's your cousin, you kind of sweep it under the rug. In our families, if it's your uncle, if it's your aunt, if it's your grandfather, if it's your child sometimes, if it's your mother or father, the idea is you have to support what they did because they're your relatives. But what they're doing is wrong. It's ruining a family. No, At the end of the day, this is my cousin. I have to support them. Yes, we come from the same background. We went to school together. Whatever the case might be. My mother knows his mother. All these different relationships, which are all fine. But none of these means I can sit there and watch someone do what they're doing is wrong and sit there and say, be hush about it. Don't do anything. Yes, in the way you object, that's going to be very different depending on the situation. Not every objection has to be like the objection of Musa, okay? Musa is his own situation. How you object is a separate discussion. But the objection itself, what Musa is doing is very beautiful. He's not sitting there and saying, oh yeah, I guess it's fine. No, he says, there's something wrong here. I'm not okay with it. It doesn't sit well with me. This is very beautiful. How often did you find during the time of the Prophet there were individuals, they wouldn't speak the truth. Why? Because my relatives told me not to. Because my relative is part of this tribe, so this is this. And this plays out exactly the same way in our communities today. Less about relatives, but people we know, relationships that we have, yes? Well, this is a person I grew up with. Okay. So now I have to support them no matter what. Okay, but they're wasting these resources in the community. It doesn't matter. I've known them for a very long time, so I have to support them. No, Musa said, listen, I know, and by the way, Khidr came personally recommended by Jibreel. Now imagine if he wasn't personally recommended by Jibreel. Imagine what Musa would have done at that point. Because we said Musa was not politically correct at all. He used to say the truth, and that's it. That's why when the Bani Israel came back and so on and so forth, and they had gone into misguidance, the Quran says, he really was harsh with his own brother. Yes, because he's a prophet of God. He said, what did you do with these people? And then his brother explained and so on and so forth. Musa doesn't hold back. You and I have to be like Musa. How we object is a separate discussion. It's not always yelling and this and that. No. Sometimes it just means you don't associate with what's happening. Sometimes you have to do more. Sometimes you have to do less. Separate discussion. But it's beautiful that Musa can't take it. Doesn't just sit there, oh, you took the life of this person. Okay, it's no problem. No, it doesn't sit well with him. So this time he came back. He told him again. And of course, Khidr, is operating from a different mode. So he said, listen, this is not going to work like this. Your objection is not a bad thing. But you have to understand, I'm functioning from a different mode. So he said, okay, no problem. إِن سَأَلْتُكَ عَنْ شَيْءٍ بَعْدَهَا. If I ever raise any more questions, then فَلَا تُصَاحِبْنِي. Then you can walk away. I don't have to be with you anymore because I know this is very difficult. And Musa himself is even realizing that this is too difficult. So now he came to the third of those events. So they continued on their path. They أَتَيَا أَهْلَ قَرْيَةٍ. They entered into a city, a town, in a village. And because they were traveling, they asked the people of that village for food. Istat'ama. They asked for ta'am. They asked for food. فَأَبَوْا أَن يُضَيِّفُهُمَا. They said, you know what? We could care less about you guys. We're not giving you any food. So Musa's looking at this. He says, okay, well, they don't want to have anything to do with us, so we shouldn't want to have anything to do with them either. All of a sudden, he sees Khidr. Go find this wall. Looking at this wall that's about to fall. It's about to disintegrate, come apart. Now he's patching up this wall. Fix the wall. And Musa's like, لو شئت لاتخذت عليه أجرا. Why don't you ask for some money or something? This is a group of people, they rejected us. Now you're coming and fixing their wall for them. Why don't you ask for like something in return? And Khidr, when he heard this, he said, okay, that's it. هذا فراق بيني وبينك. You had 3 opportunities. You blew all 3 opportunities. This is the time where I'm going to go my own way. You're going to go your own way. But in what Khidr did, he taught us a very important lesson. Because of course Khidr has his own wisdom in what he's doing. And what that wisdom is, we'll discuss momentarily. But something very important Khidr is teaching us. There's times in life you will come across a group of people, an individual who don't appreciate what you're doing. They could care less. But for whatever reason, you know between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this thing you have to take care of. Not because of them, but because between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Khidr is teaching us, listen, even if people don't appreciate, but God is expecting of you to take care of this, you have to take care of it. So you're raising this child. Will this child appreciate all the effort and difficulty that you're putting in for them? Probably not. I've yet to see any parent who turned around and said, you know what, my child grew up, he appreciated fully everything I did for him. I've never met that parent. But is it your responsibility between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Yes. So Khidr is fixing this wall. The people in the city could care less about him. But he says, this is between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I still have to take care of it. I still have to take care of it. There's times, and I speak of other communities, right? There's times you visit a community. There's parents in that community. They could care less about you as the one who's visiting or is lecturing or whatever. You're dedicating your time. You're trying to go out of your way for the youth in this community. The parents, sometimes they could care less. They don't appreciate. Oh, we had this youth session. We answered 20 of the key questions that your children had. They don't care. So are you going to sit there and say, well, you didn't appreciate it, so I'm not going to do it anymore? Or are you going to say, between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's expecting this of me. So let me go out of my way and do it. Yes, sometimes people appreciate, sometimes people don't appreciate. But just because someone doesn't appreciate, and this very much, brothers and sisters, happens in a marital life. There's going to be numerous situations where your spouse does not appreciate what you're doing. First of all, this is normal. It's not amazing. It's normal, meaning it happens. Doesn't mean like this marriage has to fall apart. No, it happens. And secondly, it can't stop you from working for the well-being of your family and your spouse. And guess what? There's going to be times your spouse does something, you didn't appreciate it, and it didn't even occur to your mind. This is how it is. Khidr is here, he's fixing this wall. No one is asking him anything. In fact, Musa is telling him, go and ask them for something. And Khidr, for whatever reason, is saying, no, I don't have to. But it doesn't stop him from doing what he knows he has to do between himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Musa is now told, هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. Okay, this is enough. Now we have to head out. قَالَ سَأُنَبِّئُكَ. Now I'm going to tell you the wisdom of all of the different things that I have done. So he began. He said, listen, وَأَمَّا السَّفِينَ. As it relates to that ship, فَكَانَتْ لِمَسَاكِينَ يَعْمَلُونَ فِي الْبَحْرِ. That ship belonged to orphans. They were orphans, they owned that ship. يَعْمَلُونَ فِي الْبَحْرِ. This was their only means of income. To move things around in this body of water. Yes? فَأَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَعِيبَهَا. So I wanted to make sure that I ruined their ship. Why? وَكَانَ وَرَاءَهُمْ مَلِكٌ يَأْخُذُ كُلَّ سَفِينَةٍ غَصْبًا. Because there was a king. If this ship had gone too far out, that king would have taken their ship if it was working properly. But this king is going to see a ship that's barely working. It's already sinking. It can't even get out on its own. He's not going to take this ship of theirs. Yes, I poked a hole, but that hole saved them from so much difficulty. That hole saved them from so much headache. So this is a wisdom we don't even understand. Now you're driving in your car breaks down, your whole day is ruined. Now you have to call someone, get help from someone. You're stuck in the middle of nowhere and you're thinking to yourself, life cannot get any worse than this. But who knows what calamity you averted? Who knows what calamity was supposed to happen? How lucky you are that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that difficulty in your life. This ship, Khidr is saying, if it goes too far, someone else will just come and grab it. You're working on something, maybe if it becomes so successful, someone else will just come and steal your idea and walk away with it. But you don't know that. So you're working hard and you say, how come I don't get the results that I want? But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, I know if you get those results, it's going to create bigger problems for you. So I'm going to hold back. I'm going to do my own thing. This is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How come my friend works and he gets this type of results? And I do work even better than him, but I don't get those types of results? How come this person, his character or her character is even somewhat problematic, maybe even, doesn't have the best habits, the best characteristics, but he got married, she got married, life is going on, it seems like everything's fine in their life. But I've worked so much on my character, and I still haven't found the right person. We don't know what the wisdom is behind these events. All we know is that there's someone running this show. And the reality is sometimes, even until the end of our lives, we won't understand what the wisdom is. And we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with submitting and saying, oh Allah, you know better. I mean, I don't know. What was the wisdom behind this? I have no idea. When a mother loses a 2-year-old, when a mother has a miscarriage, you know how difficult it is to come up with a wisdom for that? It's extremely difficult. I mean, what do you tell a mother who's lost a piece of herself? What wisdom are you going to come up with? We don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His wisdom. He knows best. Will we find out even until the end of our life even? Maybe not. A lot of these wisdoms, we never find out about them. But there must be some wisdom. Allah, so we submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the first of those wisdoms. You will see, this is why the sixth Imam, Al-Imam al-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. In some of his letters, he wrote about a very special companion of his. That companion of his name was Zurara. All the narrations we have from Zurara. And in that letter that he's writing about Zurara, or he's speaking to other people, he said, Zurara, I spoke very ill of you in front of a bunch of other people. But Zurara was like the guy. Zurara was that person that everyone else used to come. He was, one of the closest confidants of the fifth and sixth Imam. So word got to Zurara that the sixth Imam's not happy with you. He's speaking ill of you. And he's saying, he's criticizing you. So Zurara get very worried. He wrote back to the Imam. He said, did I do anything wrong? And the Imam told him, no, I spoke of you in this way because there is a danger hovering over your head. Because if they knew how close you are to our Imams, they would come for you. I spoke of you like this. And then the narration says, he quoted the verses of the Quran, the same way Khidr poked a hole in the ship of those 2 children, of those 2 orphans, so that their ship would not be seized. Said, that's why I spoke ill of you as well. This is the first of those actions. Khidr here said, فَأَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَعِيبَهَا. Yes, I decided to poke the hole in the ship. Why is Khidr saying like this? Because next time, you know what he's going to say? He said, we decided to do this for the second action. Hold on to this, we're going to come back to this, yes? At least at this point he says, I decided to poke a hole in this ship, in this boat. Okay, they move on. They came, he said, listen, the wisdom behind the second action. This young man, you took his life without him ever attacking anyone, ever creating any other problems. Why did you do this? He said, yes, this young man, you know what his story is? His story is that he was going to grow up. فَخَشِينَا, we were worried that he would take his mother and father, and because he was going to become such a stern disbeliever, he was going to create a lot of problems in their lives, and then maybe even misguide the parents themselves. He was a problem for himself and for his family. Except it hadn't flourished yet. It hadn't developed yet. You didn't see what type of person he was going to become. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His own wisdom decided to remove him at this point. Maybe that's out of His compassion. Before someone ruins their future more and more, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes them sometimes before they can do more evil in this world. And then there are times people have left that level. They've passed that red line already. The Quran says, no, we keep them in this world so that they can ruin their future more. The tyrants of this world, the Quran says, إِنَّمَا نُمْلِي لَهُمْ. The only reason why we give them time, لِيَزْدَادُوا إِثْمًا, so that they can do more evil, because their punishment needs to be heavier. This is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As it relates to this young man, out of compassion for himself maybe, and also out of compassion for his family. Then the Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had another child in mind for them. A child that would believe, a child that would obey. And the narration says this young boy that left this world, instead of him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted to them a daughter. Because of course, the boys are never turn out well. If you want a good child, you might as well have what? Have a daughter. So the daughter grew up, alhamdulillah, she listened to the parents, she obeyed. And of course, the narration says prophets came from her lineage. The boys is a separate discussion, yes? So the narration says this was the wisdom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had in mind for them. Came to the third situation. In the second one, Khidr said, فَأَرَدْنَا, we wanted to replace this child. So this one he's attributing to himself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes? Came to the third one. The third of those events, of course, was what? Was the fixing of the wall. Why, Khidr, did you fix this wall? He said, because beneath this wall, that if it were to fall down, people would start looking, was a special treasure. It belonged to two orphans. These two orphans, that treasure belonged to them. But if the wall had fallen at this point, people would have found it. But we don't want people to find it right now. It belongs to those orphans that are going to come. So because of that, I fixed this wall so that these children will grow up. When they grow up and they reach the right age and then it's found, they can take custody of it. They can take ownership of it. They can take possession of it. What wisdom does God have in mind? Now, if they gave us 1,000,000 years and said, listen, there's a wall falling down, for whatever reason, someone came and fixed it. Can you come up with wisdom like this? No, we would sit there and be like, oh, I don't know. The best we can come up with is maybe the wall was going to fall and kill somebody. This is the best we can come up with. The narration says that treasure that their father left for them, it seems as though it was a grandfather, not just their own father. It seems like it was a grandfather. That their grandfather had left there. That was supposed to become part of their nasib, part of their qismat. It was belonged to them in the eyes of God. It said from the grandfather to the time where the children would finally get their hands on this treasure was a 70-year gap. Or for example, I apologize, the narration says 700-year gap. So a lot of scholars have said this was not his direct father. It was a great-grandfather. Why? Because that great-grandfather was a good person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to bless his lineage. Now question, is it possible for a human being to do something and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not only rewards himself, but also rewards who? His lineage. Or someone to do something terrible, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maybe punishes him, but there are negative consequences that also go to the children and the lineage of this individual. When you put together Quran and Hadith, this is pretty much understood. That this is a possible thing, and it does happen. It's part of the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if the parents do good things, not only will they walk away with blessings, the children will also walk away with blessings, and vice versa. Now the vice versa is the more difficult part. Blessings for everybody is not a problem. But consequences for something I didn't do is a questionable issue. It brings up the question of God's wisdom, God's justice, and God's mercy. Well, the answer to that is, yes, this is an impact that has in the life of this child. But essentially, it's a test for the child in his own way. So if this child is growing up and for whatever reason the parents did something wrong, can this child potentially walk away with the negative consequence of that deed? Yes. Is it because God doesn't like him? No. It's his own tests. He has to deal with his own tests. The same way children are born in this world sometimes not with always all of the capabilities as other children. That's their test. It's a test of their parents. It's a sunnah of God, but it's a test. In other words, does the negative consequences affect the akhirah of the child? No. Can it affect the dunya of the child? Yes, that's a possible thing. But the akhirah, no. If anything, this child's level will be elevated because of the test that it's going through. Let's say a mother, pregnant, for whatever reason, God forbid, she drinks. We all know alcohol during the time of pregnancy is extremely problematic. Okay, she drinks. So certain effects happen biologically on the child. So that means God doesn't love this child anymore? No, it's a test for the child. Doesn't affect his akhirah. Affects his dunya, makes life difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards him more or rewards her more. Same way, if you're born in a certain area who's not wealthy, what do we say there? We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to reward you for your difficulties. Same thing here as well. Not everyone is born in the same situation. But Khidr said that grandfather of theirs was a good person. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to make sure that the children walk away with something amazing. That is that treasure. The narration says the treasure was not a big bag of gold and silver. The treasure was a golden tablet that on it had written special adhkar and special pieces of advice. And of those things was that the one who knows the time of his death is going to come will never forget about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. These pieces of advice that were golden. This was that treasure that they had left behind, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had left behind for these children. Okay, this is the third of those events. Of course, Musa at this point, he realizes that it's time to go. He turns to Khidr. He says, Khidr, as your last, words with me, my last conversation, can you share some pieces of advice for me? Because now I know that it's time for me to walk away. And Khidr told him, I will share this piece of advice for you. He told him a number of things. And inshallah, as we bring tonight's talk to an end, this will be our final advice during this month of Ramadan. He said, number one, Musa, لا تعيرن أحدا بذنب. Don't ever put down someone because of the sins that they've committed. You can look at the sin and say the sin is bad. But don't sit there and say, oh, you're such a horrible person. God doesn't care about you. You're not going to make it to heaven anymore. You're this, you're that. You don't have that. You can't scorn people. You can remind them. You can let them know you're not okay with what's happening. But ta'yir is scorning this person, putting this down person, humiliating this person because of the sins that they have committed. He said, don't do this. He said, number two, no, the best of things in the eyes of Allah are three things. Al-qastu fil jida. When you go out to make money, keep it moderate. Meaning what? Try, but then leave the results in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't become that guy who thinks he has to control everything. You can't control everything. You can control your efforts. Put in your efforts, and then leave the S in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't make your whole life about your 9 to 5. No. You do your work, you strategize, you plan, you leave the rest in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the first of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. وَالْعَفْرُ فِي الْمَقْدَرَةِ. And forgiveness when you are powerful. When you finally made it, that's when God really loves for you to forgive. That's number two. Number three, وَالرِّفْقُ بِعِبَادِ اللَّهِ. And being kind with the servants of God. Because the narration continues, Khidr told him, whoever's kind with a servant of God in this world, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows him kindness on the day that he needs that kindness the most, which is the day of judgment. And this is where the story of Musa and Khidr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings it to an end in the verses of the Quran. With that, inshallah, we'll bring tonight's talk to an end. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. Let's take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. For all of our marhumin and marhumat, especially the marhumin and marhumat of the sponsors of tonight's program, with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله اللهم صل على محمد أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله اللهم صل وسلم عليه أشهد أن عليا حجة الله عليه الصلاة والسلام هيا على الصلاة هيا على الصلاة هيا حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير عمل حي على خير عمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله استغفر الله ربي وأتوب الله أكبر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الله أكبر اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد اللهم ارزقنا توفيق الطاعة وبعد المعصية الله أكبر سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر الله أكبر سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر لا إله إلا الله الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Together, brothers and sisters. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عزمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور. وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه. وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار. في من تمن عليه وأدخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. سلام.
الله أكبر. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. اللهم صل على محمد. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. صلى الله عليه وسلم. وأن عليا حجة الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل. قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، الرحمن الرحيم، مالك يوم الدين، إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وتقبل شفاعته وارفع درجته. بحول الله وقوته أقوم. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد. سبحان الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. يا لطيف ارحم عبدك الضعيف. الله أكبر. بسم الله وبالله الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ادخل على أهل القبور السرور. اللهم اغن كل فقير. اللهم اشبع كل جائع. اللهم اكس كل عريان. اللهم اقض دين كل مدين. اللهم فرج عن كل مكروب. اللهم رد كل غريب. اللهم فك كل أسير. اللهم اصلح كل فاسد من أمور المسلمين. اللهم اشف كل مريض. اللهم صد فقرنا بغناك. اللهم غير سوء حالنا بحسن حالك. اللهم اقض عنا الدين واغننا من الفقر إنك على كل شيء قدير.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
Inshallah, the ziyarat will be after the dua. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Inshallah, Dua Iftatah will begin at 9:15 p.m. Dua Iftatah will begin at 9:15 p.m. Inshallah.
Inshallah, we'll begin the recitation of Dua al-Iftitah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم إني أفتتح الثناء بحمدك وأنت مصدد للصواب بمنك وأيقنت أنك أنت أرحم الراحمين في موضع العفو والرحمة وأشد المعاقبين في موضع النكال والنقمة وأعظم المتجبرين في موضع الكبرياء والعظمة. اللهم أذنت لي في دعائك ومسألتك فاسمع يا سميع مدحتي وأجب يا رحيم دعوتي وأقل يا غفور أثرتي فكم يا إلهي من كربة قد فرجتها وهموم قد كشفتها وأثرة قد أقلتها ورحمة قد نشرتها وحلقة بلاء قد فككتها. الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ صاحبة ولا ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا. الحمد لله بجميع محامده كلها على جميع نعمه كلها. الحمد لله الذي لا مضاد له في ملكه ولا منازع له في أمره. الحمد لله الذي لا شريك له في خلقه ولا شبيه له في عظمته. الحمد لله الفاشي في الخلق أمره وحمده الظاهر بالكرم مجده الباسط بالجود يديه الذي لا تنقص خزائنه ولا تزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. إنه هو العزيز الوهاب. اللهم إني أسألك قليلا من كثير مع حاجة بي إليه عظيما وغناك عنه قديم وهو عندي كثير وهو عليك سهل يسير. اللهم إن عفوك عن ذنبي وتجاوزك عن خطيئتي وصفحك عن ظلمي وسترك على قبيح عملي وحلمك عن كثير جرمي عندما كان من خطائي وعمدي. أطمعني في أن أسألك ما لا أستوجبه منك الذي رزقتني من رحمتك وأريتني من قدرتك وأرفتني من إجابتك فصرت عدوك آمنا وأسألك مستعنسا لا خائفا ولا واجلا مدلا عليك فيما قصدت فيه إليك فإن أبطأ عني عتيت بجهلي عليك ولعل الذي أبطأ عني هو خير لي لعلمك بعاقبة الأمور فلم أر مولا كريما أسبر على عبد لئيم منك علي يا رب إنك تدعوني فأولي عنك وتتحبب إلي فتبغض إليك وتتودد إلي فلا أقبل منك كأنني أتولى عليك فلم يمنعك ذلك من الرحمة لي والإحسان إلي وتفضلي علي بجودك وكرمك فارحم عبدك الجاهل وجد عليه بفضل إحسانك إنك جواد كريم الحمد لله مالك الملك مجري الفلك مسخر الرياح فالق الإسباح ديان الدين رب العالمين الحمد لله على حلمه بعد علمه والحمد لله على عفوه بعد قدرته والحمد لله على طول عناطه في غضبه وهو قدير على ما يريد الحمد لله خالق الخلق باسط الرزق فالق الإسباح ذي الجلال والإكرام والفضل والإنعام الذي بعد فلا يرى وكرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى
منازعة فبلغ بقدرته ما يشاء الحمد لله الذي يجيبني حين أنادي ويستر علي كل عورة وعناعسي ويؤذم النعمة علي فلا أجازي فكم من موهبة حنية غد أتاني وعظيمة مخوفة قد كفافي وبهجة منيغة قد أراني فأثني عليه حامدا وأذكره مسبحا الحمد لله الذي لا يهتك حجابه ولا يغلق بابه ولا يرد سائل ولا يخيب عامل الحمد لله الذي يؤمن الخائفين وينجي الصالحين ويرفع المستضعفين ويدعو المستكبرين ويهلك ملوكا ويستخلف آخرين والحمد لله غاسم الجبارين مبير الظالمين مدرك الحاربين نكال الظالمين صريخ المستصرخين موضع حاجات الطالبين معتمد المؤمنين الحمد لله الذي من خشيته ترعد السماء وسكانها وترجف الأرض وعمارها وتموج البحار ومن يسبح في غمراتها الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله الحمد لله الذي يخلق ولم يخلق ويرزق ولا يرزق ويطعم ولا يطعم ويميت ولا يحيى ويحيي الموتى وهو حي لا يموت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير اللهم صل على محمد عبدك ورسولك وأمينك وصفيك وحبيبك وخيرتك من خلقك وحافظ سرك ومبلغ رسالاتك أفضل وأحسن وأجمل وأكمل وأزكى وأنمى وأطيب وأطهر وأسنى وأكثر ما صليت وباركت وترحمت وتعنت وسلمت على أحد من عبادك وأنبيائك ورسولك وصفوتك وعلى الكرامة عليك من خلقك اللهم صل على علي أمير المؤمنين ووصي رسول رب العالمين عبدك وليك وأخي رسولك ومحجتك على خلقك وآيتك الكبرى والنبأ العظيم وصل على الصديقة الطاهرة فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين وصل على سبطي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة صل على أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي وجدك على عبادك وملائك في بلادك صلاة كثيرة دائمة اللهم صل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكة المقربين وأيدته بروح القدس يا رب العالمين اللهم اجعله الداعي إلى كتابك والغائم بدينك أستخلفه في الأرض ارتديت حولا أمدي له من بعد خوفه أمنا يعبدك لا يشرك بك شيئا اللهم أعزه وعزز به وانصره وانتصر به وانصره نصرا عزيزا وافتح له فتحا يسيرا واجعل له من لدنك سلطانا نصيرا اللهم أظهر به دينك وسنة نبيك حتى لا يستخفي بشيء من الحق مخافة أحد من الخلق اللهم إنا نرغب إليك في دولة كريمة تعز بها الإسلام وأهله وتذل بها النفاق وأهله وتجعلنا فيها من الدعاء إلى طاعتك والغادة إلى سبيلك وترزقنا بها كرامة الدنيا والآخرة اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملنا وما غصرنا عنه فبلغنا اللهم المم به شعثنا واجعل به سدعنا وارتق به فتغنا وكثر به غلتنا وعزز به زلتنا واغني به عائلنا واغني به عن مغرمنا واجبر به فقرنا وسد به خلتنا ويسر به وصرنا وبيض به وجوهنا وفك به أسرنا وانجح به تلبتنا وانجز به مواعيدنا واستجب به دعوتنا واتنا به سؤلنا وبلغنا به من الدنيا والآخرة آمالنا واتنا به فوق رغبتنا يا خير المسؤولين وأوسع المعتين اشف به صدورنا واذهب به غيظ قلوبنا واهدنا به لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك إنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراط مستقيم وانصرنا به على عدوك وعدونا إله الحق آمين اللهم إنا نشكو إليك فقد نبينا صلواتك عليه وآله وغيبة ولينا وكثرة عدونا وغلة عددنا وشدة الفتن بنا وتضاحر الزمان علينا فصل على محمد وآله وعنا على ذلك بفتح منك تعجل وبضر تكشف ونصر تعز وسلطان حق تظهر ورحمة منك تججلناها وعافية منك تلبسناها برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على 9 معصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.